Hello there, everybody. It's Heather at the listening table. And for those of you who are here, welcome. For those of you who will see this later, welcome. So today I'm going to be joined by either one or two guests. One may or not show up, but that's okay. And we're going to be talking about seen and unseen disabilities. So I'm going to welcome back now Natasha Bowman. Hello
Hi,
there.
how are you?
Oh, good. Should I be saying doctor? I just thought about that.
No, no,
Okay,
you should
just
not.
we both have that JD, and I was thinking,
Yeah,
does she go by the
no.
doctor? I can't remember.
I use it like I want to flex for some reason, but
Right now, you're like, no, we're keeping it real. It's just you
no,
and
we're
me,
keeping it
right?
real. Yep.
Well, I was telling everybody I just kind of wanted to talk about seen and unseen disabilities, and the reason why I decided to I was thinking about this other day, like what would be a really good thing to talk about, one that not a lot of people talk about. And you of course are coming back to, you're going to be with us plenty of times, but you already came back one other time as we were
Yep.
talking about mental illness, emotional well-being, and that being one of the unseen disabilities. And so
Mhm.
I thought I would bring you, we'll see if Andre shows on here too. But one day I was doing a group of listening sessions for a client of mine in the DEI space, and one of the groups was for seen and unseen disabilities. And there was one gentleman in there who actually had to use a wheelchair, he had an assistive device that way. And what he shared with me was a time when he was, well, not a time, many times, but a specific time, he was going to a company, he was invited to go to a kind of company gathering, which he
Mhm.
often is. But what he said to me is that what they don't really realize is when I go to those, like they don't really take the time to think about how hard it is for me to even get there, to show
Mhm.
up there, to be like at a table feeling eye to eye, like they'll have a
Mhm.
place for me, but then I'm below everybody, or they
Yep.
don't even have a place for me. And I feel very awkward. I don't really want to
Mhm.
go. And it's kind of a bummer. So instead of it being a place of celebration for him, he was like, it
In a
doesn't
place of
feel great.
frustration.
It is. And then I
Mhm.
was thinking of another team member who was on there that suffered from anxiety. And
Mhm.
she said that uh, she at work, one of the things that really like sets her off is if her back isn't to a wall, so she's sitting kind of, gonna say, opposite of where maybe the doorway is, and people can keep coming up to her, and so it kind of causes her all day this like
Oh,
anxiety, so that
yeah.
they had to move her to a place where her back was to the wall, so
Mhm.
that when people would come in, there was no one behind her, and it wouldn't
Right.
cause her to feel a
Mhm.
certain way. And I just thought, how there are so many people, whether seen or unseen at work, that are struggling and experiencing this, and
Yep.
we aren't seeing them. And I thought, well, number one, what better person to bring on to talk about this than you? And of course, if Andre does pop on here, him
Yes.
too. He
Yep.
is someone who, at a very late in life, became blind, and so he
Mhm.
is like, I think I want to say like 90%. So I want to hear more of his story if he
Oh,
can
I
pop
do
on here.
too. Yeah.
Um, it's hard to be thinking about what that looks like. And I
Mhm.
thought about it too, because there's been times where I completely forgot, like we're on a Zoom call and I'll say something like, "Oh, and did you see that thing?" And I'm saying it to everybody, like in a
Yep.
group, and going, "Oh shoot, oh my gosh, Andre." We
Exactly.
all do
Yeah.
this. We all
Mhm.
do this. Even those
Exactly.
of us who think of us maybe as like a little bit more aware in this case, right,
Mhm.
or more
Mhm.
educated in
Yep.
this case,
Mhm.
where we just say the wrong things. And
You
so I
just
don't know. Just wanted to
no,
like bring
you're
up,
right.
how do we handle some of these? Like, what do you think?
It's so funny you brought up so many good things in that. Number one, I was dealing with a bad case of sciatica all summer, to the point where I could barely walk. And going to my daughter's middle school graduation, my husband had to call and say, "Do y'all have a wheelchair?" Otherwise, I would not have been able to come. And that was my first time really feeling a physical type of
Yes.
impairment where my movement was restricted. And even at the airport, we left to go somewhere. I had to go in a wheelchair. And just, having that point of view that I've never had before was quite eye opening. And thankfully, in those two, venues, it was, very easy. They had everything that was accommodating at my daughter's school, at the airport. Of course, they have a lot of accessibility. But in between time, when I wasn't somewhere and I had to walk, or there were steps. I live in New York City, so not everywhere has, elevator. And I was in so much pain, and I just thought about what that may feel like. I knew my situation was temporary,
Mm,
but what that feels like for someone
mm,
where it's permanent, and not, and it was very frustrating. I say you're in this
mm.
celebratory setting, And but you're, instead of celebrating, you're feeling that frustration and things like that. And so
Mm,
I really think about that, and and I had to do a much better job, in terms of accessibility, even doing training programs like you just described, asking in advance for participants, is there any accessibility needs, and really retooling the way that I think about that, and not, just making assumptions
mm,
that, people have, what they need. And but it's ironic that you talked about the person that needed to be set up against a wall, because I've been thinking a lot about what does workplace accessibility mean for people with mental health conditions, So when you go
mm,
through the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that has several sections, and one of those sections are the workplace. The other is just about, public accommodations and accessibility, bathrooms and things like that. It really doesn't talk about in terms of accessibility. It uses the word accommodation, but it doesn't talk about accessibility. And
mm,
I've been doing a lot of thinking about what does workplace accessibility mean for those with mental health conditions? What are those things? Just like if you have a physical structure of a building and you automatically have that ramp there for someone that may need to use it, what are those predetermined things for people with mental health conditions that we can already have in place where your workplace is accessible, rather than I have to come up and ask for an accommodation, right?
mhm,
So I think one example of
mhm,
what workplaces are doing, and maybe this is not, they're not even thinking about this being a mental health accessibility, is having, where you don't have a set office or a set desk or things like that, right? Because there may be some days where, yeah, I may want to be with a group of people and I like talking because, I'm a people person or whatever. But there may need to be a day where, hey, I need to be alone. I need to be, maybe not near people, or, whatever. Or like you said, I need that desk today where my back is to a wall, or I need to move from a back to the wall. I need the sunlight, things like
yes,
are things we need to be thinking about in advance in terms of workplace accessibility for mental health conditions, so that we're not having to accommodate so much on an individual basis. It makes it easier for those with a mental health condition that may not want to disclose, because we're trying to get people there, but not everyone is there. So, the better that we cultivate our, not just our culture, but even our physical work environment, the better. So I'm still thinking through what does that look like. And I would love for anybody that's watching this, if you have ideas, send me a note, so I can add to some sort of toolkit. But what do we need in workplaces in terms of accessibility versus individual accommodation?
yeah. I was as you're, and I'm seeing that Andre's trying to join. So let me just
Oh,
really
great.
quickly tell. Hey, Ashley, if you're there, I'm gonna have. I can see he's having technical difficulties. It
Okay,
says
great.
something like he has to give. So hopefully he'll be able to get in here a little easier soon.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that is interesting, and even thinking through each, like the anxiety side. Let's
Mhm.
here's what we'll do before we go even deeper into that, because there could be
Mhm.
people who aren't aware of you and the work you do, even just your background. Give a
Yes.
little background to why you're here, why you continue to be here. At least I think you know why that is, but why you're here, why you continue to be here, and then also a little bit about your foundation too. I think that would be
Yeah, thank you
helpful.
for that. Well, I'm here because I've been a fan of Heather Younger for some years now. We've been linked in, but I don't know, for I feel like a decade, and so just always want to support the work that she does. We have a lot of theories and philosophies about civility and caring in the workplace. And like I said, we have a JD in common, just so much in common. So that's why I'm here again, and I will always be here whenever she needs me. Number one. But I am by trade a labor and employment law attorney turned HR because I was tired of being on the dark side of misconduct, and then turned business owner. I started a DEI leadership development consulting firm, Performance Renew, some years ago. And then during COVID, I had a mental health crisis. Many people come to find out 25% of the population was diagnosed with a mental health condition during COVID, and I was one of the 25%. And that led to a suicide attempt. It led to an inpatient hospitalization in a mental health facility and a bipolar disorder diagnosis. And since then, instead of, kind of being ashamed and hiding my diagnosis, I decided to be more vocal and, honest about what I went through during COVID, because I know so many other people went through it with me or experienced the same things. And I wanted to start a different kind of conversation about mental illness, especially as it relates to working and living with mental illness, and destigmatizing it, and showing people that you can still thrive, you can still enjoy life, you can still be successful at work. Despite your diagnosis. And because through that, my husband and I founded the Bowman Foundation for Workplace Equity and Mental Wellness. And our mission is exactly that, is to create healthy and psychologically safe workplaces. And we're, rolling out a lot of great things that we're excited about. We just rolled out a workplace mental health certification for HR professionals. So we're so excited about that type of work, but just really changing the dialogue around mental health is what we're doing through the foundation.
I love that. And it looks like we have Andre on here now. Yay, you got on, Andre.
Yes.
Hey,
Hi, Andre.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Yeah, so it wouldn't let me go in with my browser and whatever. So my apologies.
So Andre is on here. Andre works with me actually on the National Speaker Association Colorado board,
Mhm.
and but probably, gosh, in 2020, right before COVID hit and got everybody knew about it in March. He and I shared a stage at this it's called the MIC Meetings International Conference, and I heard a little bit about his story, and I love the way he spoke, but I just love also just his resilience, and he had amazing fur babies to help him around. I just was like, Andre, welcome, but I want to tell everybody, like, when we talk about seen and unseen disabilities, tell everybody a little bit about your story and your background.
Okay, very quickly. Native of Argentina, 40-year career in hospitality industry, worked in South America, Europe, all over the States. 11 years ago, I went suddenly blind over 2 weeks. And then I lost my job, and I reinvented myself as a speaker. And I travel all over the country speaking on change and linking it to curiosity, saying that if you're not curious, you're not changing. And that I don't care how curious you are, but if you don't take initiative, nothing happens. So that's 68 years of life in
What I love most about Andre, again, but I want, that's why I brought you on here, because I feel like there's there's no victimhood in you. There's not even an ounce of it inside of your. I mean, I don't know what the heck I do that far into my life, all of a sudden going blind, and the fact that you're traveling all over the country, blind, having to obviously take your cute little fur babies with you to help, but still, like, thinking about how difficult it is, and you just don't have 1 ounce of victimhood, not that I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot. So I don't know. As we talk about this, I was saying the context is I was doing a group of listening sessions for a client of mine, and in a group that, in this particular group, was seen and unseen disabilities, and talking to one gentleman who had to use a wheelchair, and he talked about how when he'd go to parties, or he would be like, we did company parties, he'd go and he'd feel like it wasn't fun, it wasn't celebratory, it was kind of like, it was a pain, because he knew things weren't set up for him. He'd go and he'd be at like this weird, they'd try to be accessible, but they put him at this place where he was just much lower than everybody still, so it just felt strange. And I don't know, what do you, what is that struggle like, and what can we do as when we think about workplaces specifically to make sure that those with seen and unseen disabilities have more of a voice, feel more included, feel like they belong there? What are some of your thoughts in that space?
It's interesting. When I was diagnosed that I was going to be blind, my assistant on her own took initiative and called an organization where a lady came in and talked to the entire management team and told us this: when you've got a blind person, this is how you interact. So if you're in a meeting, you announce yourself when you walk in, you announce yourself when you walk out. You don't say it's over there and stuff like that. If you're going to have a handout, make sure it is sent out ahead of time so that the person with a disability can listen to it with their software. She also distributed cardboard glasses that simulated my blindness. And so everybody can put those on and then they could see what I can see, so to say. Okay, so I've got extremely limited vision.
Yes.
And so I think that was a very important first step.
Yeah.
And but I think it falls on us to educate the people around us. I mean, I got to speak at a convention and I'm standing at the entrance to the ballroom with my cane and people walk by me. They don't know how to interact with a blind guy. Or if they come, they speak loud to me because thinking I can't hear them or something, right? But you mentioned my fur baby, but so I'm with my guide dog. It's so different. Everybody, so he's a barrier breaker.
Yep.
And the thing is, so what can you find as a barrier breaker? What can the person with a disability do? So when you are in a wheelchair, I have been trained to go down to their level. Okay, so either get to my Catholic thing and go on my knees. Okay, or but I mean, get down to their level, because especially in a loud event and so if you're up here, they down here, and that height difference makes it hard to hear.
Right.
So and it's I'm the kind of person I want you to ask me, okay, and how can I be of assistance? Don't come. I was in Argentina and I was going to cross a big street. I had my cane. And I was trying to get used to the traffic there, and so I'm listening to a couple of switches, the change of the light, because we're trained to listen for the surge of the traffic, right? This guy comes from behind me and grabs me by the elbow and pushes me into the street and says, "Let's go."
Oh, wow!
The intention was awesome, but the approach was scary. Yeah, are you trying to pickpocket me? Are you, what's going on? And then I got to the bakery where I was going to go, and there's a line, and the lady behind the counter yells at everybody, says, "Let the blind guy through. We're gonna take him."
I'm laughing not because it's laughing.
I know. You laugh at those things, right?
Oh my goodness!
But what is the intention?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's people need to learn, but the intention was awesome. I was in Rome, and I had an entrance to the Vatican to be where the Pope was going to be. And so my wife went to the end of the line. There was a long line at the special entrance, and I went with my email to see a carabinieri, and I say, "Hey, am I in the right line?" And he goes like, "Yeah, but you're blind. You don't wait in line." He went to the end of the line, got my wife, whatever. So, and then, the same thing. You go to a public bathroom in Rome, you have to wait in line and you have to pay. And they kept getting me from the back of the line saying, "You don't wait in line. Blind people don't wait in line." So I told my wife, "We're going to sell this cane when we leave here."
Oh God!
You're so right, André. And I have an invisible mental disability and illness, and it was funny. Sometimes you do have to poke fun at yourself, and like you said, it's that barrier breaker. And just yesterday, I made a post on LinkedIn, and I was listing all of things, challenges that I had gone through, and then a lot of accomplishments that I made at the same time. And one of my lines, that my final line was, "Then at 42 years old, I have a mental illness." And so someone, very, very, politely, said, "Well, you don't have a mental illness. You live with mental illness." And I responded back. I said, "Well, I haven't known bipolar disorder long enough to live with them yet. So I just say I have them."
Good for you.
You're absolutely correct, because, words that I, teach about that, you shouldn't define someone as their disability, right? It's, you're
Right.
someone living with, or you someone diagnosed with, or, but you make it human centered first, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Andre, who happens to be blind, but not blind Andre, just as an
Right.
example.
Right.
You put that human first as you're defining or identifying someone.
Yes.
Remember, they're a person first. And
Yes.
then if you need to add that there's a condition that someone would, need to know about, you add that as a secondary,
Yes.
right? And so, you're not an alcoholic, you're not an addict, right? It is someone with an addiction, someone with, who had been diagnosed with alcoholism. But
Yeah.
sometimes, going back to my point, you just got to make fun of it. I was like, well, I don't want to live with bipolar
Yeah.
disorder just yet. I don't know what that will just yet, but
That's to say, you see, I was on the Mayor's Commission for People with Disabilities, and that's an advocacy group that is one of the commissions that reports to the mayor on key issues.
mhm,
And one of the issues that we picked was the word handicapped,
mm,
Mm.
and how to ban it, because it's handicap parking, handicap this, handicap that,
mhm.
okay, whatever. But I think that, you know, sometimes we need to lighten up, and
Yeah,
do you find offense in the word? I'm blind. I'm not visually impaired. I don't care what you
right.
call me. Okay,
Mhm.
it's whatever it is. It's a descriptive. Okay, I'm a man. Okay, so one day somebody's going to find offense in the word man, and we're going to have to come up with a new word, right?
Right, right. Exactly. I've gotten the same feedback because I make fun and I say, I'm writing a new book about my mental health journey. And the title, and Heather, you're the first to know that I'm saying this publicly. But the title is Crazy AF. And the AF is and fearless. You think it's something else, but it's and fearless. And I put as in the opener, about the word crazy. Yeah, I know that's not politically correct. I know it may even seem insulting or a slur, but let's think about that for just a minute because I need to make this book very realistic for you to understand about maybe yourself, about me, and people that you know. And let's just be realistic. When we see someone that's demonstrating unusual behavior for themselves, we usually say, "Oh, Natasha's acting kind of
Yeah.
crazy these days."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We
Mhm.
don't say, "Oh, Natasha's acting like she has a mental health condition." Right? So let's just be realistic. Let's put it into terms that people use in everyday language so that it resonates as I'm describing situations that can be helpful for you. Like I didn't know I had a mental illness. In fact, I always say that mental illness has fueled my professional success because I spend the majority of my life in a bipolar manic episode where I didn't really need a lot of sleep. I can work for long hours. Oh, and it gives you a whole lot of overconfidence, right? So people always ask me, oh, how can you as a Black woman from the South walk into New York City, walk into rooms full of white men and like take over the conversation? I thought oh, I'm just, a superwoman. Come to find out, I had this mental illness that gave me this
Yeah.
delusion of grandiose, whether it was right or wrong. I always walked around with this delusion of grandiose. And so that kind of fueled my success. So, just to put it in realistic terms, I think it's very important that we use that everyday language. And like you said, Andre, it's a personal preference as well. If someone, I always say, how do you want to, be referred to in whatever way? I don't care if you call me crazy. Like, okay, fine. I'll even joking with my husband when I spent time in a mental health facility. It was like, oh, it was during the time I was at the crazy house. It's just that we, kind of laugh about it. But, again, bringing back some of that humor. And then again, it's about what the person feels comfortable with, because to others that may be a slur. So if someone tells me that they're offended, that's not how they want to be. And I don't refer to other people as that. It's just myself.
Yeah.
But if I use a term like you just said, I may use mental health condition. Oh, I don't want to be called mental health. I want to be called something else. I just respect that. And that's what I use to refer to that person. And I think going back
Mm.
to your theme, Heather, in terms of the art of listening,
Mhm.
it's about when we take time, stop, and listen to each other and understand our different experiences, our different journeys. what respect looks like to each one of us, et cetera, et cetera. It goes a long way. We can't cookie cutter any of this. I think there's maybe a few things that we can agree that's offensive, shouldn't be said out loud whatsoever. But there's a broad range of things that just boils down to the individual. So taking time, pausing and asking, right? I'm sorry. How do you want to be referred? How should I say? And it's okay to mess up and say, hey, André, you're Black. Can I ask you questions about your experience and what should I do? Because I know I love for people to ask me questions because it's education and it makes it easier and you're more comfortable with people that have either a visible or non-visible disability. And that comfortability helps with bias. And it gives other people in the same situation, right, a better experience because you already know you got other people have that level of comfort.
It's funny. I was asked to set up a panel for an association annual meeting on DE&I. And so I asked my panelists, and I said, is it okay if I introduce you this way? And they all said, okay. So when the introduction came, I said, well, I've been asked to put this panel together. And so I went to look for a Black chick, and she went, check. For hola chica. And she goes, check.
I love it.
Blind Hispanic guy, check. Okay. And then, okay, plain vanilla white guy, check.
That's awesome.
I love it. Because that's the everyday language, it's the Black chick that works, in the 2A, let's use that everyday language, it, like you said, it's the asking, if that's okay with the person. Heather did the same thing. Like when she's like, oh, I introduce you, do I say doctor? And I'm like, oh no, that's way too forward for me. It makes me feel old. And but that was, very polite of her to say, how should I introduce you, and I think it's listening, being curious as to what you said, André, is a humongous part of it. The more curiosity we have, the more listening we do, the more caring we become.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay, there's two things before we go on, because I'll come to you, André, on something you said about the different things. But anybody who's out there, I don't know, because you can never tell who's actually out there. So if you're out there, please put a note in the comment, just shout out, let us know where you're coming from, tell us you're here. And also don't forget to interact, because when you interact in comments, I actually do put it on the screen, and if you have questions, we actually will address that. So if you're there out there live in the world, this is recorded. So obviously I know that it'll be shared afterward, but if you're there, let us know you're there. Hello there. Okay, André, one of the things you made me think about, you said it a couple of times, which is really like microaggressions that are positive, like that positively benefit you, but they're microaggressions. So the idea of you're the blind person, you're coming to the front of the line. You're the blind person, you never stand in the line. And you're like, I need to give away this cane because I'm not sure I like to have this exception. Even though I like to be up front, I'm not sure I want to be like pitied or something in this way. I'm curious to know what you think about that, because that definitely is full on screaming microaggression to me. What do you feel on that?
It is interesting because like I fly, right? Every week I'm on a plane. And I love being treated a little bit different, being able to pre-board. Okay, because it's hard. Okay, getting on the plane now. If the plane is already full, and now you try to feel your way to the seat, and you try to get somebody to read you the seat number. Now you try to find where is there an empty place to put my baggage. Okay, et cetera, et cetera. So I love the idea that they say you can't pre-board, and so from that perspective, I think that if there are things that have been done to, it's like having curb cutouts for people in wheelchairs. Okay. It was hugely expensive for our communities to do that, but it was something that I think is super important. And it's accommodations that we do to help people deal with things that set them a little bit apart, to bring them a little bit more like us.
Yeah.
So the equity,
right?
Equity. Yeah. And but what I would say, what I'm thinking is when it was probably how it was said more than the fact that it's provided. So like if they would have seen you, I don't know, you tell me if this is what I'm thinking, how I would have done it. If I would have seen that you may needed some assistance, I would have come back and say, would you be okay if I moved you to the front, because there's a long line and I would do that kind of on the back end without like screaming it out loud or whatever. And then you'd say, yep, I'd love that. And then I can escort you there. Would that be something you'd like? Yeah. That's the thing.
But, and it's I've been, of course, around lots of speakers, And I've been around some that are blind, and they truly take offense. I don't want to pre-board. I don't want you to treat me different. I am
Yeah.
just like you are, and
Mhm.
I've set out to prove it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going like, yeah, but we're not, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, if there are little things, I have a accessible parking thing that we keep in my wife's car.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, if I see a person in a wheelchair and we both want to go to the same spot, of course I'll give it to the person with the wheelchair, and we'll find somewhere else. But walking through a parking lot is a scary thing when you're blind, especially with these
Mm.
electric cars that hardly make any noise.
Mhm.
Parking lots are dangerous places.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
people sometimes tell my wife says that people look at us funny when I get out of the car with the cane and we park it at an accessible parking spot, because in people's minds, it's meant
Mm.
for people with a wheelchair.
Mhm.
Ah,
Okay.
that's, yes, yeah, I can see that. Oh,
Yep.
and yeah, and even someone told me once, like one of the more offensive things if you are using a wheelchair is if someone just like you exactly like you described at that crosswalk, Andre, where they just like automatically take the wheelchair and start pushing it.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a second. And like when you're
I'm
like
not
taking your
moving.
arm and coming, you're like, excuse me, I'm pretty sure I didn't give you permission. So it's like that whole, that's why I thought this was such a key topic to bring up at the listening table, because
Mhm.
listening is, it's not just listening with what people say, it's listening what we see,
Mhm.
the unsaid, recognize the unsaid, what's happening in people's lives around them. From your perspective, Natasha, from your perspective, Andre, where there's partially seen Andre on yours, but like you said, they're like not quite getting that and understanding the whole complexity. They just see the cane, right?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
I was like, I had to make sure I brought you in because it's just, there's so many levels there. And I know
Yeah.
I've messed up myself and I'm like, oops, I am so sorry. Like we're in a group and I say something like, oh, well, don't you see it there? And you're like, no, I don't see it there, Heather. And I'm like, oh shoot. It's like you do it. And I think the key is also like to say, oops, I totally messed up. I
Mhm.
forgot that thing. And I agree with you too, Natasha. I love the fact of you saying, just use like plain old language. And yes, we're going to offend sometimes.
Mhm.
But if
Yeah.
we go, oops, I'm so sorry. How should I do that next time to be
Mhm.
better next time? I
Yeah.
Yeah.
feel like that's a better place to be than to say, I'm not going to talk to you at all, like you said, Andre, because I don't even know how to deal with you. I don't even know what to say to
Mhm.
you if I don't offend you. You're not a
Exactly.
human.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I can't even like that's kind of where we have relegated folks that have any kind of seen or unseen disability, is this place where it's like unhuman, then we
Yeah.
treat them inhuman.
Yeah, I got so much feedback as I've been talking with people with mental health conditions, and and they have described in the workplace how different their experience has been if they've taken, let's say, maternity leave or some other kind of leave of absence, and they've gotten cards and flowers and meals from their employer, and calls, how can I support you? But if they, for some reason, have shared that they're off due to their mental health, it's like silence. It's like, oh, it's no acknowledgement whatsoever.
Yeah.
When you return back to work, everybody's strange and awkward around you, and they don't quite know what to say. And that's why I think it's funny that you bring whatever, like you said, Andre. I love that whole barrier. How you break the barrier, and that's exactly what I try to do, and why I talk about mine so openly. I joke, I use myself so that you feel comfortable as the brunt of the joke, so that you feel comfortable, like, okay, I'm still the same person. I'm still the same Natasha. I've always joked on myself. I don't, even before
Mm,
my mental health condition, I never mind being the brunt of the joke. And nothing has changed. Another dimension has been added to my
mm,
identity, but I'm still okay with you asking me questions, being curious. I'm always very transparent and vulnerable about my life. I always have been. My mother used to always tell me I share way too much, because I would tell her business and mine at school. And,
Yeah.
and so, yeah,
But
my
it's good. I think it is good. And it's, I think I'm the same way. People ask you, oh, so you mind if I ask you, and how do you go? What happened or whatever? And
mhm,
tell them the whole story. Help them understand, and help them understand what can I see, and so
mhm,
so forth. But
mm,
with mental illness, I completely agree with you. Okay, and alcoholism and drug
mhm,
abuse.
mm,
And so those are things that I am a Rotarian, and in Rotary has taken as its worldwide mission to get rid of polio. right?
Mm.
And it was a huge undertaking. We thought it was going to be just give everybody 2 drops. In a couple of years, we've done the world over and it's over. Wow, it's billions of dollars later, and we're still struggling.
Mm.
But one of the new things we want to embark on is mental illness. And
Mhm.
because of the stigma, the
Mhm.
lack of understanding, and just what you said, right? Oh, I've got cancer. Oh, I'm so sorry. How can I help
Mhm.
you? Oh,
Mhm.
I'm bipolar. Ugh.
Yeah. I don't want to know any of those details. It's like, and we've got to, dig, unpack it like you would unpack someone. Okay. Oh, what stage are you in? What's your treatment plan? What can I do? Ask those questions. What
Yes,
does that look like?
yes,
And just like you, Andre, although I want to show the world that I can still do and accomplish the same things that I did pre-diagnosis, it's also important that you do know that I have this condition, or that I live with this condition, or whatever is appropriate, because there may be times that I need to be able to tell you I can't do something today because I'm not mentally well.
right.
And you know what that means for me, right? And
Yes,
I'm not being lazy or whatever, and my character, my credibility, my dependability. So if I say, hey, I'm not mentally well today, so therefore I need to clear my calendar, you understand what that means for me. You understand how important it is that I am able to shut everything down, adjust my medication, talk to do whatever I need to do to be well. Because if I keep going and pushing through, just like I did during the episode that I didn't know I was in during COVID, and I kept showing up for Zoom calls and kept, acting like everything was okay. And inside, not sharing that and not getting the treatment that I needed. And it resulted in a suicide attempt. So it's very, very important that, either you're someone in my household, my husband, my child, my children, or someone work related, that when I say I'm not doing mentally well, that you understand what that means. And that can
right.
go in a very dangerous direction. So, okay, I need to not disturb her. I need her not to feel guilty for, doing this. That's why it's important that you do know that I have this condition. Now know that I'm going to still show up the way that I can. I'm still credible. I'm still dependable. But again, going back to the other comparison of those with physical illnesses, if someone were diagnosed with cancer and they were to call and say, hey, I had chemo yesterday and I'm not feeling well today, I can't make it, you would never question that. You would never say, oh, you're not a credible person, you're not dependable, you're not this. You
My
would
daughter is going through
Mhm.
she suffers from debilitating migraines.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mm.
and she gets them frequently, like at least once a week.
Mhm.
Mm.
And some days, literally, it is throwing up,
Yep.
dark
Yep.
room,
Mhm.
can't do anything. People don't understand it. She doesn't
Mm.
drink. She avoids all the trigger foods. She does everything.
Mhm.
She's restricted her life to being able
Mhm.
to. But employers, co-workers, friends, okay. And one of her biggest worries is her relationship with the people close to her,
Mhm.
because even for them, it sometimes is hard to. Well, but I mean, hey, yesterday you said this. Is why is it still today the same way? Okay,
Mhm.
Mhm.
or she plans a trip in
Mhm.
the middle of a vacation. All of a sudden, So you said something earlier on today. You said a visible disability,
Mm.
and that, I think people ask me, well, it's funny the question people ask, right? But would you rather be blind or
Mhm.
deaf? And and
Mm.
and I say blind
Mm.
every day,
Mm.
because
Mm.
blind is visible when for you,
Wow.
when deaf is not. Okay,
Mm.
Yeah.
and so I walk with a cane, and
Yep.
I have a disability. But when you're deaf, you don't have a sign that says I'm deaf.
And
Yeah.
you gotta wait in that line at the Vatican because no one can see your your disability, right? And
Yeah,
maybe you can
Mhm.
skip the line,
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Wow.
So
What a question.
Mhm.
yeah.
What a question. Those are close friends asking you that question? Would you
Yes.
be deaf or blind?
Hmm.
Okay, close friends. Okay, because I was going
I
to say,
never even thought of that question, but
yeah, I can't even think about that. I
yeah.
would just, I'd be there just here's what I'm going to be 100% honest. And I think everybody, I would be out there trying my hardest not to mess up, not to say something wrong,
Hmm.
which we just talked about earlier. I'd be that same person because I don't want to offend. I take my relationships and connections to people very seriously. My authenticity, my realness is very real, like it's real. And so if I mess up, that's real. And I'm trying hard not to do it as much, so
Yeah.
I think I'm spending time doing that. And I think I love this conversation because it does give one a permission to not just be so restrictive in that, like really focus first on the human, asking permission, leaning in, listening, recognizing the maybe things that are happening, the things that might be hard for the person in front of you, leaning in with curiosity and also with permission, asking
Yeah.
permission to do things, also saying, oops, I said something, was that wrong? I mean, I think it's just perfectly fine. So this is given me more of that feel. And I hope those who hear this will understand that, because I do feel like we've gotten to a place on many fronts in different areas that we've just gotten way too overly sensitive by the words we use. Because we're not looking for intent. I love Andre's focus on it, but I know the intent, I know the heart, I know the intent, I know the heart. And if we had more people looking for the intent and the heart in things, there'd be a lot less of us being offended by the words that come out,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. I have a great white friend, and she'll run something by me like, hey, if I say this to a black person or ask this question, or can you read this post to see if it comes off, and I love that about her because she sees our relationship where it can be. And she knows I'm not going to judge her for, if it is something offensive, I'm not going to judge you for thinking that. It's like, oh no, so it may be interpreted as offensive, but here's why. It's the education around it, right? Because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So, here's why. Yeah, that may be interpreted as offensive. Here's why. That's what I care about. Not the fact that you thought that, not the fact that you asked the question. It's let me do the education around it. I invite that. I invite curiosity. I invite the opportunity to educate. And I think we have so many people, I even look on LinkedIn and there's so much like fussing and, finger pointing and I'm like, stop the fussing, just like educate, because some people genuinely don't know, right? If you've never been exposed to a group of people, a demographic, you don't know. It wasn't until I moved to New York City and I've been exposed to the world at this point. And I've learned so much about different cultures and races and everything else. And I realized just how, quote unquote, ignorant I was living in Alabama for the first part of my life, so ignorant. Andre, you may appreciate this. When we first moved here, and I live in the Bronx, and it's mainly a Dominican neighborhood, people that look like me, even darker complexion. And I was like, wow, New York school systems are wonderful. So my husband goes, well, why do you say that? I go, all the black people speak Spanish, that was my, ignorance of, not understanding from Hispanics. I really, in Alabama where I lived, there really wasn't any Hispanic people. So I didn't understand like all the different countries and the different, looks and appearances and accents. And then now I know it all. Like I'm an expert, I feel like. But but that was just my ignorance, right? So asking those questions, and I would just be curious. If I'm in a diner, I would ask like, hey, do you mind if I ask you where you're from? Let me learn more about that. What city? Did I get on Wikipedia and we read about it like as we're having breakfast, and that's what we do as a family. It's just really try our best to get to know people and our differences and our different journeys. And the more that we just do that, the more just better people we are. And that's what ultimately we want to be.
Well, that's why if I told you I've got a difficult pregnancy, or if I told you I've got cancer or whatever, you'd start asking questions and say, oh, how was it diagnosed? What kind of cancer is it? And what treatments are you going through? And so forth. And I think with disabilities, we should train people that it's okay to ask the same level of questions. Okay. So ask us.
Yep.
Exactly. I love that so much. Go ahead, André.
Yeah. You're talking earlier about workplace, and the other thing I think is super important at the workplace is I think the employer should make every effort to get you the assistive devices or to do the things that are necessary to accommodate your disability. You know,
Yeah.
and again, I don't know if it's fair to be called a disability, so I'm not going to call it a disability, but it's a differentiator. But I was in the hotel industry my whole career, and so we were with a lot of early people in alternate lifestyles. And so when the need came for locker rooms that were not either male or female, and so forth, but having the flexibility in your mind to understand, and it's funny when I met with the Pope, and I told him, thank you for your message of tolerance, but we need to take it to acceptance, right? Because I tolerate you is so different from I accept you. And so it's when we're different, and whether it is on any one of the differentiators on gender or race or disability, whatever it is, what do we need to do as a race, as a group of people, right? I mean, as human beings, to get to the point where we accept each other. Will there always be discrimination? There is. I mean, there is income discrimination, right? I mean, I make more money than you, and my language is different than yours, and so on and so forth. So, but how do we bring that playing field a little bit more to a level where we learn to accept that, and that we don't say, well, you're trying to play a game here, okay?
Right.
And that we understand that we all come from the same way. If we are all in a totally dark room, okay, when you're blind, all the people around you are the same. You don't know who's in a wheelchair. You don't know who dressed funny or who has tattoos. Okay, and all the people are the same. And it's funny, you walk into a room and you're sighted and you immediately go like, no, okay, maybe, right? But when you're blind, you come from a totally different perspective, because your prejudices take a lot longer to kick in because you don't know who's in front of you.
Wow, I love that. I love that.
And I'm thinking, even with you, more, you and I, André, I'd really, there's so many questions I want to ask, but I don't have enough time for that. I might have to bring you back, because there's so many things as I think of the transition from being sighted to non, that to transition. I did think so many questions. I think that it's so key. And as I think about listening, because I talk a lot about recognizing the unsaid, and just like when we don't, we almost have to pretend we have that cardboard in front of our eyes to, in many cases at work, as I'm talking about, but even just anywhere, where let's stop waiting for our ears to receive it. Let's also, but also remove that cardboard and actually see it, and also at the same time feel it. So it's like all the senses, like the senses of what's happening around us. So like with you, even though you might not be able to see what I'm doing, as I say something and I slow my talk down and I start talking about my father, and now you're hearing the tone, and I can start talking more somber, and now you're just hearing more. So yours is more elevated. But we also that are sighted have to start to also do that too, where we're recognizing things that we do see, we're recognizing things that we do hear, and even maybe things that we sense with like our hair that stands up on our arms. Like, there's things that we get when we're around people. And how do we act, and how do we respond to that? How do we show up, and how do we pause, and all of those things? I know this is so complicated. I feel like people always say when they're on something with me, they always feel like we're in a therapy session. It's just the way I am. I just naturally, I want to go deep. I want to go deep, deep, deep. I want to, peel back the onion, because I feel like when we start to do that, it's very therapeutic. That's why I love the work you do, Natasha, the way you do put it out there. It's super therapeutic to just like put it out there, let other people put it out there, because we're human. And if we don't recognize that fact, that we're going to be imperfect in how we show up, and how we show up for people who need us, in the unseen and seen disability space too. I think that's the other thing, is seeing us knowing how we show up, and having that grace for all of us, giving the grace to others in this moment. I think is the most important invitation we have.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, without a doubt.
This has been so amazing. I'm telling you, I could just go on and on. I mean, there's so much here. This might have to be a second round too on some
Oh,
of
it
this
may be. You
expanding
always
it.
bring the most amazing people to my life. So the last time I was on Listening Table, I was with Kevin, and we've been talking ever since. I don't
Oh,
know.
nice.
So it's like, and now I have an
Oh, yeah.
Andre in
Yep.
my life.
Yep.
So you always just bring the most amazing people. I love your circle, and I'm so glad that
Oh,
you invite me into your circle because
You know,
I'm
yeah.
enriched. My life is
thank you.
enriched every single time.
And his Van Hall, by the way, Van Hall.
Yes.
So because he only has his first name on there. So if you want to go look him
Oh,
up.
okay, got it. Okay,
But
well, I'll
yeah,
find you. I will find you.
I love my circle too. I'm inclusive in the circle, but I love my circle. So thank you so much. Thank you too for being here, and for whoever didn't. If you showed up and you're out there and you were shy, that's okay. But you'll see it later, and hopefully you'll
Please.
reach out to these amazing two humans on the screen and take all of this in. I learned a lot, and there's still much more to learn. So I appreciate you too. Thank you for giving your all.
You know, do you mind if I do a quick quote?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
And in America Got Talent, there was this 30-year-old woman that had cancer, and it's in her body still. And she sang a song. It's okay was the name of it. And Simon started to cry, and he asked her, says, "How do you deal with this weight of this illness?" And her response is something that has stayed with me. And she says, "You can't wait for life not to be hard to be happy."
Oh,
That's so powerful.
oh, that's profound.
And it is so profound, you know. So let's stop taking ourselves so seriously.
Yep, that's right.
And let's choose to be happy regardless of what's going on.
That's right. Yes, I totally agree with that sentiment. You know, just what it
such
is.
big hugs here. I'm gonna find a way to hug you soon here, André.
Yes,
See you soon. That was awesome. Again, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining the listening table, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you too.
Thank you.